Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host Gordon Smith and I'm joined as usual by co-host Jay Sherrick. In this week's show, amongst a few other things, we're talking all things WestJet. Hi Jay, how's it going?
All right, Gordon, how are you?
Doing really, really well. Let's talk about what we're going to be discussing today because we were joking before the show, it's sort of like Benny and the Jets. We've got Jet2, JetBlue and WestJet. We're going to cover off a few of those just fairly quickly at the start of the show. Anyone who read the latest issue of Airline Weekly, as we're recording here on September the 8th, knew that we had some insights on what JetBlue, the British leisure carrier, and JetBlue, that needs no introduction, said last week about market trends. Jay, for anyone that missed that or hasn't quite gotten around to reading it yet, tell our listeners what they need to know firstly about JetBlue.
JetBlue gave a rather upbeat assessment of trends going into the fall. And again, I don't know how representative that will be if other airlines are also experiencing those same, welcome trends. But they did say that revenue was sort of coming in ahead of expectations. They said, quote unquote, demand for air travel remained strong throughout the summer peak, and adding that momentum from earlier in the summer carried forward into August and through the Labor Day holiday. So that's a good sign. They said strength, they cited strength in bookings within 2 weeks of travel. So as you tend to get closer to the date of departure, the closer in bookings tend to be the ones with the higher fares, the higher yields. So again, that's a good thing. And over on the cost side, they said that their operations are improving, and I guess that helps both revenues and cost. And they said that fuel prices were coming in a little bit less than expected. So all good news. Now, I guess we should caveat all of that by saying JetBlue has been struggling pretty mightily of late. So they have been struggling with losses. And so just because they're bullish relative to their prior outlook doesn't mean that all things are going gangbusters or that everything is happy and sunny by any means. But a good sign nonetheless as we go into some of the more off-peak periods of the year. Now, shall we switch over to Europe?
Sure, because I heard that nothing beats a Jet2 holiday, Jay.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. It's just a question of whether or not people can afford one. And the answer is that maybe many more people can, because they did say that, let me pull it up here, net ticket yields for our flight only product have become increasingly attractive. And I think that's another way of saying cheaper. So that is a sign that they may be feeling the need to lower fares to stimulate traffic, which is not necessarily a good sign. So it's kind of the opposite. We've got a JetBlue, Jet2, contrary directions here. While JetBlue seems to be more optimistic going into the fall, Jet2's latest update is a little bit more on the bearish side. Their CEO, Steve Heapy, I'll give you a quote here. We are currently operating in a difficult market. So it is a little bit more of a shaky feeling for Jet2 than JetBlue. And once again, I'll say it. I'll repeat the just a question of whether or not this is something that all of UK airlines, all of European short haul airlines are seeing, or is it just a Jet2 phenomenon? They are a little bit unique in that they do have a big tour package sort of holiday business, and they specifically mentioned that their falling ticket yields that I called out is happening on their flight only product. So I don't know. It's a flag. It's something to watch, but it certainly wasn't as bullish as what we're seeing on the JetBlue side.
You almost feel like they've got the statements mixed up, Jay. We're so used to Jet2 saying everything's great, we're opening a new base, we're buying all these new planes, and JetBlue saying, oh, everything's terrible. Maybe they got lost in the post. The mood music from JetBlue certainly more upbeat than we've seen of previous quarters. And if you are looking for more insights from JetBlue, beautiful segue coming up here, Jay, we've got the JetBlue CEO, Joanna Geraghty, joining us at the Skift Aviation Forum in Fort Worth, Texas on December 3rd, live.skift.com for the evolving agenda, because we've just got the first round of speakers so far. Much more to follow on that front, live.skift.com. And if you are a subscriber to the Airline Weekly product, you get a free in-person ticket to join us in Texas.
Guys, I just want to, if I may say one more thing about JetBlue. It is probably not coincidental that their greater optimism comes as Spirit, which is a very close rival, is again contracting very sharply and is possibly even in danger of disappearing. And so you would have to assume that on routes like New England and the Mid Atlantic, New York, et cetera, down to Florida, down to Caribbean, where JetBlue and Spirit compete very closely, you have to assume that JetBlue is benefiting quite a bit from Spirit's distress. And you even wonder whether some typical Spirit passengers might be wary of booking them, not knowing whether or not they'll still be around in the next couple of weeks, couple of months. Again, I don't want to, I don't want to write off Spirit Airlines just yet. Maybe they're in for a comeback. Maybe they're in, we've got a merger ahead or something like that that'll save them. But you have to assume that some of these uncertainties are on the minds of airline passengers in the U.S. right now. So that could be a big part of the explanation of why JetBlue is more optimistic. And now I'll let you proceed.
Well, just before I do, Jay, that brings me quite neatly to some comments from United Airlines on September 4th, because they announced a schedule expansion, including new routes from Newark down to Columbia, South Carolina, that is, various routes around Houston, and some going down into the Americas. And in that statement, we had Patrick Quayle, a familiar name to many listeners, I'm sure. He's United's SVP of Global Network Planning and Alliances. And he was pretty straight on the nail. I thought he might sort of tinker around, sort of mention Spirit in passing, but not quite put the knife in. He said here, quote, "If Spirit suddenly goes out of business, it will be incredibly disruptive. So we're adding these flights to give their customers other options if they want or need them." That was United on September 4th. So clearly, quite direct messaging there, reading between the lines, or however you want to read it. United basically saying, if you're not feeling comfortable with Spirit, we've actually got some alternatives for you, and lots more aircraft going in, larger aircraft, I should say, into some of those key Spirit cities. United says that with the schedule expansion, United will offer 45 flights a day to Orlando, 30 to Fort Lauderdale, 43 to Las Vegas, with larger aircraft going into some of those key cities. So more on that when we get it, Jay, but it does seem like some of the competitors are circling.
Right. And you can see how by just saying things like that, you're kind of sowing more uncertainty in the minds of air travelers. I don't know it's if that's playing dirty or not, but but you can see United just by questioning Spirit's future existence. They are perhaps influencing consumer behavior.
Yeah, we don't have Spirit here to defend themselves, but it is still officially business as usual for the most part over at Spirit, and we wish everyone who works there or flies with them all the best in these coming weeks with all the uncertainty swirling around there. Jay, let's move on to WestJet, because we've had some news out of them last week about a big Boeing order. And I think most of our listeners, it's fair to say, will be familiar with WestJet, but I thought it would be good just to give them a quick scene setter of who they are, what they're about. Founded in 1996 in Canada, with essentially quite a bold idea at the time. It was to bring low-cost air travel to Canadians who up until then had relatively few affordable air travel options, nothing like we'd seen south of the border with Southwest and others. Started with just a handful of aircraft, handful of routes, Western Canada, old sort of start small and do something special, and then say, hang on a minute, we can bring this further. And it did it very well. It quickly earned a reputation for friendly service, low fares, and sort of entrepreneurial spirit. Yes, it was no frills, but there was still a little bit of humanity to it. And it's really evolved from quite a scrappy upstart into a major national player. I remember a previous place of work, Jay, asking, is WestJet about to become Canada's second flag carrier, sort of de facto second flag carrier? And it's not up to me to determine whether that has borne out or not. But they're no longer just in the narrow body field. They've got the 787 Dreamliners, they've got a business class product, they've got long haul operations, and then integrating with Sunwing, which I'm sure we'll touch on later in the conversation, is for all intents and purposes a major force, not just in Canadian aviation, but beyond, with all the various cities that it touches. Well over 100 aircraft, glowing global network, and a historic Boeing order just last week, their biggest ever order with Boeing for new narrow bodies and wide bodies. So it all sort of comes together, Jay, and it seems like, despite all the US-Canadian political tensions and everything else that's going on in the world just now, that WestJet's bullish and it seems to be entering a fairly bold new phase. What was your thinking when you saw the order come in?
Right, and I'll make some comments on the order in a moment. I think you covered them very well. A lot of important facts about WestJet and who they are and their role in Canadian aviation. As you mentioned, they are global now, flying 787s to Europe, to Asia, etc. So very very important airline. They a few things I'll just say before we discuss the order in detail. They did earlier this year sell a 25% stake in themselves to Delta and Korean Air combined. So you can see they're sort of there. I don't believe they're a Sky Team member, but they're allied with that Sky Team family, so to speak. They also cooperate with some of the other carriers that are in that grouping: Air France, KLM, Virgin Atlantic, a few others. I saw they have some Kenya Airways is in the picture now, and I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting. But they do have that share ownership of that relationship with Delta and Korean Air. They are majority owned by a private company, private equity company, I believe. So they are not publicly traded, which means they don't release quarterly results. They don't publish regular financial statements. So we don't know all that much about how they're performing. A little bit of a black box in that sense. And they used to be public. The private company called Onyx bought them before COVID. And perhaps at some point, if the market is attractive, they'll put WestJet back onto the public markets, and then we'll have a more comprehensive view of how they're doing. But for now, we don't really know. I think it was pretty clear that for a while they were struggling with their long haul operations, their 787s. They have to do most of their intercontinental wide body flying from Calgary, which is their home base. And it's in some ways it's a good market. I mean, it's seen a lot of growth. Calgary is a very Calgary and that whole Western Canada, Alberta region has been very big energy related economy, and they've seen a lot of population growth, economic growth over the past decade or two. So that's been helpful. But it is a much smaller market, population wise, economy wise, than say Toronto. And Toronto has just been a more difficult market for them to fly intercontinental just because Air Canada is so strong there. So they did struggle with their intercontinental markets. That does seem to have improved. And again, we don't know because they're private, but one reason that suggests that things indeed have improved is the fact that they are ordering more 787s. And that was a big part of the order that you referred to, Gordon. And how many 787s was it? 20 or seven more?
Yeah, they've got various options. So as we often have with an aircraft deal, they get a firm order, and then they've got the options at a later stage to buy more. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag there.
Yeah, so they'll continue with their intercontinental operations. They do sort of the chief part of that order was for 60 737 Maxes. No big surprise there. What was surprising, however, is that they did opt for the 10 version, which is the largest version. And that's a little bit of a surprise. I mean, given Canada's many domestic markets in Canada are rather thin. They're some of them can't support such large aircraft. So I was surprised to see that. Now it could be that over time they'll convert some of those to the smaller versions. But that was a surprise to me. 60 737 MAX 10s.
Yeah, that's a big one. And options for an additional 25, Jay.
Right. So they're yeah, that's a lot of planes. And of course, a lot of those will be for replacement, but they'll, assuming they will take the 10 versions, they'll represent new capacity in the form of upgauging, because a lot of their planes that they fly today are smaller than that. Some of the earlier generation B737s. So if I just before finishing up on WestJet, I just wanted to mention a few capacity trends. Now, you said, Gordon, that they purchased an airline called Sunwing, which is partially owned by Europe's TUI. That deal closed, I want to say, in 2023. Maybe it was last year. But in any case, that gave them more strength in the eastern part of Canada, where they were typically weak. WestJet has struggled in markets like Montreal. Sunwing kind of provides a little bit more heft there in the east. And then Sunwing is also very strong as a tour operator and even a scheduled only carrier in these Caribbean markets. These call them winter sunshine markets. And those are, interestingly enough, proving very valuable right now, because a lot of WestJet's a lot of WestJet's markets to the US are distressed for, as you know, there's less Canadian tourism down to the US right now for, reasons I think we all know. So there, if you look at WestJet's capacity for this quarter, the third quarter, it's actually it's up overall about 5% year over year, but to the US it's down 16%. So they have to put, there's got to be growth elsewhere. So domestic is up 11%, and international ex-US is also up 11%. So and a lot of that is the Caribbean. So, and remember, Caribbean is not going to peak in the summer, so they'll do more of that as we get into the fourth quarter and then the subsequent first quarter. So it's a little bit about where and how much WestJet is growing.
Thanks for that, Jay. A few more WestJet themes I want to pick up with you in part two. Before that, a quick reminder just to send any questions or comments that you might have for us to podcasts@skift.com. That's podcast with an S at the end. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Kopit, editor-in-chief at Skift, and I've got to be honest with you, I am just blown away by how fast our industry is changing. AI is transforming how people book, platforms are flipping business models and consumer behavior. It is more unpredictable than ever. And that's why I am so excited for this year's Skift Global Forum happening September 16th through 18th in New York City. This year's theme jumps into the future, Travel 2030, people, platforms, and new paths forward. You'll hear from leaders at Booking Holdings, IHG, AirAsia, plus dozens more shaping the future of travel. And this year, we've got more than just stage talks. We've got expert-guided roundtables and new networking formats designed to spark real conversation so you can do real business. Expect it to be more interactive, more personal, and more valuable than ever. Join me and the rest of the industry at Skift Global Forum. Use the code PODCASTS for $800 off the full price at live.skift.com. Hope to see you there.
Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith, joined as usual by co-host Jay Shabbat. Part one, we were discussing briefly a couple of the jets, Jet2, JetBlue, and now we've been focusing on Canada's WestJet. Jay, looking at the order for WestJet with Boeing last week, they're doubling their 787 Dreamliner fleet. I remember they were getting quite excited out of Toronto. They were putting that across to London. I think don't quote me on this. I think they tried Heathrow for a while and then maybe Gatwick and then sort of floated between the two and then said, this isn't working from Toronto, Jay. But they've doubled down in Calgary. Seems to be a decent market for them. But they also have a reasonably large regional fleet, sort of getting into the Q400 sort of territory as well. Is that just pure play feeder operation and PSO stuff, or is that a bit more of a bit more of a breadwinner for them. What's your impression?
Yeah, I mean that regional stuff is an important part of their network. I mean, WestJet is, and we've talked about this. It's a very similar situation for Virgin Australia when we talked about the Australian market. A lot of similarities between the Australian and Canadian markets, other than the weather. The weather is very different. But if you look at population size, if you look at the large expanse of territory, if you look at just across different even the economies of both countries are very resource heavy, whether it be energy and mining, things like that. So a lot of similarities. And WestJet, like Virgin Australia, when it first began, very successful, growing very fast. But Canada, like Australia, ultimately, it's not that big of a market. So they ran after a few years. They ran into the question of where do we grow next, and so then they had to purchase. They entered the regional market. They entered they crossed the border into the U.S. They went down to the Caribbean. They then snuck over the Atlantic to Europe. Then they went 787 so they could do all the way to Asia. So you could see they're constantly looking for growth, but in doing so, they've had to become more complex, and that's the typical trade-off that airlines are always facing is complexity has its downsides, but it also opens you up to more growth opportunities. And they've felt over time they've had to do that. Now they've had less trouble than Virgin, say, in as they become more complex. But yeah, the regional markets are very important to them now. They feed, particularly now with the international, because you have to feed the hub, Calgary in particular, with as much traffic as possible, to fill those rather large planes. So the that WestJet Encore is their regional operation is very important to them. So yeah, they and over time they've become more of an attractive airline to business customers by adding things like they've over time they've enhanced their loyalty plan and added first class seats and all that kind of business class seats, all that kind of fun stuff. And at this other end of the scale, they've also targeted the very price sensitive market. And for a while, they were doing that with a sort of an airline called Swoop. They decided,
I remember them. The sort of
remember
pink and
Swoop?
white,
Yeah.
pink and white livery.
Yeah. Everybody's favorite colors.
Steve Greenway, who's now with Flydeal and Saudi. He was the CEO of Swoop for a while.
Okay, yeah. So they decided to close that, but they do have sort of those. I think they call it the ultra basic fare, what we call in the U.S. the basic economy fare. So they're going after that market as well. So they are, you can say, trying to be all things to all people. That didn't work so well for Virgin Australia. It seems to be working okay for WestJet. Again, we don't really know how they're doing. But the fact that they're ordering all these new planes is a good sign. And they do have somewhat of a comfortable duopoly. I probably wouldn't classify it that way, but with Air Canada, obviously on some routes they do compete with Transat. Porter's pretty big, so my characterization is probably not fair, but a lot of routes, the Air Canada is their big competitor. Of course, they compete with U.S. carriers on U.S. routes, and there's competing for connections and things like that, but with other carriers. So that's a little bit about there's just some more about WestJet as they approach the winter season, which is, of course, they're off peak in Canada, though not off peak for the Caribbean stuff, sunshine stuff,
the snowbird stuff, Jay.
Snowbird stuff.
Let me ask you to take a little bit of a step back and maybe a little bit of creative license here. Do you see any parallels with Alaska Airlines just over the border in Seattle and WestJet in terms of an airline that did pretty well with narrow bodies and is now flirting with the long haul stuff, the wide body stuff, both of the 787s, and thinking, guys, maybe you should have just stuck with what you knew. There's maybe some growing pains here. You're getting into a very, very complex market, and by muddying those waters, yes, there are some great rewards available, but also plenty of risks. What would your comparisons, if any, be? I'm not don't want to put any words in your mouth, drawing parallels between the two. But just to me, not just the geographic parallels, there does seem to be a little bit more in terms of the strategy there between Alaska and WestJet.
I think that's a great comparison. There's a lot of similarities there. Sure, some differences as well. Alaska, of course, just purchased Hawaiian Airlines, and they operate from Seattle, which is an extremely, extremely strong economy with more people than, say, Calgary. So Seattle is a stronger base to operate international from than Calgary. Then again, Calgary doesn't have Delta breathing down its neck. So yeah, you can see sure there are differences, but it is I think that's a good exercise to kind of compare the two. And you're right that WestJet, like Alaska, or let's say Alaska, like I said about WestJet,
Yes.
similarly ran into issues where we look 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, we can't grow anymore, so maybe we need to go into new markets like long haul. And in that sense, WestJet has a very similar mentality. So yeah, good analogy.
Don't put your crystal ball away just yet, Jay. If you had your Jay Shabbat crystal ball looking at WestJet in 5 years' time, considering not just the Boeing order, but everything else that's going on, not least with Air Canada. Obviously, they've got their labor dispute still bubbling away. The latest that we had from the union vote was that it was fairly loudly rejected. So back around the discussion table there. So definitely some more turbulence in the Canadian landscape in terms of things at Air Canada, certainly as we're recording here September 8th, Jay. But taking those short-term hits and picks and troughs and everything else in between out of the equation, what do you think WestJet would look like or will look like in 5 to 10 years? Is this becoming a really quite significant player, or you look at the fact that yes, they're doubling their wide body fleet, but it's still going to be fairly modest, nothing certainly even approaching Air Canada levels. Some might say even not really causing much of a hit to Transat and what they do either, Jay, but some very significant movement, like you said, on the MAX 10. That's a very large aircraft, depending on how you can configure it. So they could get some real growth, even considering the replacements that some of those aircraft will be tasked for. What's your impression when we record here? Slightly grayer, slightly older, maybe with a slightly better microphone and laptop in 5 years' time, Jay. What do you think WestJet's going to look like?
Would WestJet consider buying Transat?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Air Canada tried, and
yeah,
that
they
kind
did.
of hit the rocks with regulatory resistance over in Europe. Yeah, it's. I mean, that's who knows, but that's you could see the logic there. If they had more, Transat is very strong in Montreal and Quebec and the East in general, so that seemed to be a nice fit, and they have great little operation down to well, not so little operation down to the Caribbean in the winter and over to Europe in the summer. So who knows? That might that might be an avenue to pursue. I mean, who knows? Even Porter. So the point I'm making is that consolidation could come. It's not Canada is not a very nobody really expects it to be very high growth. It is. There are concerns about the economy. I mean, the Canadian employment statistics came out last week, and they were pretty rough. I mean, unemployment in Canada right now is, I think, above 7%. There's a lot of stresses on the economy between the tariffs from the U.S. and which are the tariffs. U.S. Canada trade hasn't been hugely interrupted by tariffs because a lot of that trade has been exempt from anything that complies with that old USMCA agreement is exempt. So there has been not as much disruption to US Canada trade as there might have been, but there's still a big question mark over that. There are still aspects of trade, steel, autos, and things like that have been hit. So that's been one aspect of the Canadian economy where you have stress. You also have low-ish commodity prices. I mean, we know airlines know all too well that oil prices are rather low right now, which WestJet loves. But well, they kind of WestJet's one of those airlines, and there are quite a few of them around the world that live and make a living in energy heavy economies like Calgary. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for WestJet when oil prices are low. They probably would tell you that they love it, but it does hurt their local economy, does take some buying power away from the people of Calgary who might be thinking of taking a trip to Europe next summer or whatever. So I am meandering here, but the point is that, things to look for as we, think about what 2030 might look like for WestJet. One is there could be more consolidation in the Canadian market. Two is, what will the economy look like? And I guess we can also add, what happens in terms of, competition with Air Canada. Does Air Canada overcome their recent labor struggles? And I should say WestJet has had its share of labor struggles too. They suffered a multi-day strike last year with their mechanics, I want to say, if memory serves. So competition with Air Canada is obviously, a big factor. And then we'll see what happens, with tourism down to the US. So a whole lot of things up in the air. But I wouldn't see WestJet as a fast growing airline. I think they'll grow incrementally through upgauging. They'll and I should add one more thing going back to some stresses on the economy, which is also not very welcome for airline growth, is that immigration has largely I don't know if it's I don't know the numbers, but I don't know if it's a stop to the extent that it has in the US, but immigration in Canada has fallen a lot. And that was a big drive. If you listen to Air Canada, for example, they talk all the time about how Canada's, very large number of immigrants fuels a lot of traffic and new network growth to markets around the world, whether it be in Europe and Asia and Middle East, Africa. So that slowed down as well. So some headwinds for sure. But we'll just have to see in the next couple of years how WestJet is able to incorporate these new aircraft and whether or not they can perhaps even get back on the public markets, which, you and I are always rooting for because it makes our jobs easier, right? We can figure out what's a little
Love a public filing, Jay.
Yes. We don't like secrecy.
No. Open your doors. Let us have a look.
Open it up.
The House of Horrors has been opened and we can see it all. No, but we will keep an eye on WestJet and the Canadian aviation scene more broadly, closely, not just on the podcast, but also in our Airline Weekly issues. And if you're not already a subscriber to Airline Weekly, go to airlineweekly.com/subscribe. There you can get a free trial issue, find out what all the fuss is about. And a quick reminder that as an Airline Weekly subscriber, you get access to all the airline news on skift.com, plus Skift Research's airline reports, plus, as we said at the top of the show, the in-person tickets to the Skift Aviation Forum happening this year in Dallas-Fort Worth, December 3rd. There we are. Thanks for that, Jay. Enjoyed that tri-jet discussion. See what I did there? One for our.
They should have called it Jet West. Then it would have been better for us because it would have been JetBlue, Jet2, Jet West. It would have had more of a rhythm. Do you like the name Jet West? What do you like better, WestJet or Jet West?
Purely, if I was on
Jet
a
West
consumer
sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, if I was on a consumer panel saying, which one do you like? Jet West, sure.
I think that's
it's probably 60-40 for me though. I'm not completely wedded to one or the other.
Not convinced.
Well, I don't know as well. Jet West might have already been taken, in terms of the patents and the copyright and trademarks and all these other bits. I speculate wildly. I'm not sure, Jay. One for after hours. After we put the
maybe even one for David Neeleman, who is I believe is he speaking at an upcoming Skiff conference.
Yes, ding, ding, ding. Yeah, we got the bell there ringing. David Neeleman is also due to join us in Fort Worth on December 3rd.
So you like the way I added that in there.
So
and I mentioned Neeleman because he was one of the founders of WestJet. There is some relevance here.
There's relevance to everything you say, Jay. Sometimes it's just slightly more tenuous than others. Enjoyed that. Thank you for the Tri-Jet chat. Thanks to Jay for joining me this week. Thanks as always to our producers, Monica and Will. And if you are joining us at the Skift Global Forum in New York City next week, then do say hello. I'll be there with Meghna Maharishi and some of the other Skift teams. So I look forward to seeing you and meeting you in person. In the meantime, wherever you are in the world, thanks for listening and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
With
Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.